This is Not Another Church Podcast with your host, Pastor Tom.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is Not Another Church Podcast, and I'm your host, Pastor Tom Harrison. Today, joining me is Matt.
What's up?
And Donna.
Hello, everyone.
So, we are going to continue our conversation in Bible stories for adults, where we're kind of going back through the Old Testament, going back through some of those Bible stories that we first were exposed to with flannel graphs and in children's church, and we're digging a little bit deeper and trying to learn a little bit more. So last week we looked at what led up to the fall, and this week I thought we would look at the curse, because when there are actions, there are consequences. And there are some things that happen in between those two things that we really need to touch on. So where we left it was Adam was standing there. Adam, who had been set up as the king of the earth, literally, he had been given dominion over everything, is standing there in passivity watching humanity plunge off the cliff.
Yes.
And
passive being the important
yes,
description there as we go through that, and you look at that and go, what was he thinking? What was going through his mind?
well, and I will say as a man,
He was wondering what was for supper, if you say that.
no, but I will say, though, there is something, a temptation that naturally lies in men that says, avoid the hassle. Anything that I can do to...
Do not poke the bear.
Exactly.
Just don't do it. Why would I? Why would I need to?
So women are the bear? Is that what you're going with? That's a whole other podcast.
Bear is conflict in general. Anything that messes up my flow that's good and just easy.
Okay, good comeback.
Anything
I like
that
the
is.
recovery,
So
Matt.
it could be a woman. It could be another man that you have issues with. It could be anything. Just don't poke the bear of conflict. Just don't do it.
Well, just anything at all that's going to be a hassle.
So this is something that started with Adam? I mean,
Clearly.
Why was he...
Clearly. Because
But
he's
what?
standing there going, well, that snake is talking.
But he's the king. I mean, if he's already been appointed, sin has not inhabited the earth yet. Why is he passive?
Well, but we can see how many men do we see in ministry where passivity is a real problem in their life.
Yeah. Touche. I mean, true point.
And
There.
I will say, in my own heart, if you get in the lazy boy, you get, exactly everything the way you like it, and somebody goes, hey, there's a leak in the kitchen, part of you goes, well,
Probably should call somebody about that.
why don't you put a bucket under that? Because I've already got my drink the way I like it. I'm already why would I want to get up right now?
Just the other day, Ben walks in the door. I mean, literally, my husband is walking in the door, and I'm like, the washing machine is overflowing. And he was so not happy about that moment. He did a great job. He went and immediately was responsible and adulted and did all the things he was supposed to. But yeah, that day was a perfect example of I've just walked in the door.
Oh, I mean, literally on Sunday, William left here and he thought he had been smelling burning oil, which he wasn't telling me about.
Yeah. Not till it's a problem.
And so he left here, went to the local auto parts place, and went in to get oil because he was going to change his oil because that would magically fix an oil leak. And comes out and recognizes that there's this huge puddle of gasoline under the car because what he was actually smelling was this leak in the fuel line. He calls me, and my first response was to be really angry. It wasn't his fault.
Your facial expression was totally there. I walked in the office as you were sitting there.
And you really want to just say, don't you realize that this is Sunday, and so I'm supposed to get a nap?
I've just preached the word of God and served my Savior.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Matt, you totally missed that. I went walking in the office the other day, and he's sitting there, and his facial expression, and I just said, everything go all right with
I mean,
your sermon?
it sounds
this
like it's
morning?"
William's fault.
You know?
Yeah, I think you're fine. Yeah, it's totally William's fault.
So, but I could see that the whole rest of my day was now going to be covered in grease
Under a
underneath the
car.
car. And when I ask him, where's the leak? He goes, driver's side. I'm like, oh, son, I'll be there in a minute. All right, so passivity is a decision. And in fact, at Honeymooners Sunday night, as we were talking about, we were going through different ways you can bless your wife and different ways your wives can bless their husbands. This idea of passivity came up, and I reiterated to those guys, recognize that putting a decision off is a decision.
I am almost like, and this is not, I don't mean this braggadociously, I'm so impatient the other way. Like, as soon as something is messed up or a decision needs to be made, I'll do it, and usually do it to where I'm so, again, impatient, or not necessarily impromptu,
Anxious.
but yeah, a little bit.
Anxiety is usually at the heart of some of that.
A little
Yeah.
bit. It's because, it's broke. Guess what? I'll fix it. I mean, it's done. I don't know how I'm going to fix it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but guess what? We're going to fix it. Because I felt like my dad was like that. My dad, which is, it's not bad of my dad, but it's like,
Give it a few kids and some exhaustion, and
I guess maybe so. We'll get around
talk
to it.
again in a few years,
It'll get fixed. We'll get around to it. I was like, no, if there's an issue, or just do it now. Like, okay, so about a year ago, we remodeled our house. We had a water leak, and with insurance stuff, we just the way it worked was really bad leak. A water main froze up during January, got dropped, really got cold, and it busted up a shower main in the bathroom. And the morning I walked out the next morning, we had, at the time, had carpet, and I walked out, my feet went squish, and I was like, this is bad. This is not good. And so it had gotten like the master bedroom into the living room, and so it was just like, I mean, we had to remodel almost half the house.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, I was like, you know what? We're going to take this. The house is already cleared out of a bunch of stuff. We're just going to we're just going to clean out a bunch of other stuff. We have like an upstairs loft, and it just became, that just where we put all the junk. And I wanted to clear out all the junk. It might have been my mom's. It might have been somebody else's. It might have been somebody else's mom's, or it could have been I don't know what it was.
You were just ready to handle it.
But it was a good time for us to get it going. And so my dad was like, oh, we'll get around to it. And I was like, okay. What about now? We'll get around to it. It's like, okay. Oh, we'll get around to it. And I was like, no, forget that. Like, no, absolutely not.
Now, just so you know, you've got you and your dad handling it two different ways.
Yeah.
That's going to be true when you get married, too.
Yeah, and
God
that's
always puts those two different people together. One wants to handle it now, and one wants to be like, we'll get it.
To me, it worked out perfectly because I got what I wanted and it got clean. To him, he was a little bit more upset. And it was one of those things where I chose to ask for forgiveness, not permission. And I had me and two other buddies bring their trucks, and I called Center of Hope on a pickup day, and which is a thrift store that'll come pick up your junk for you. And I said, hey, you guys, we're clearing this out today. And my dad got home from work that day, and that loft was clean. Let me tell you, and it's spotless now. It is absolutely clean. A lot of room for activities up there.
Or for a new pile of junk as the years progress.
No. As I'm there, there's no. I'm not a minimalist, but I don't like unnecessary junk. And I say all that to come back to I think I struggle with the opposite end of that. Of obviously, in some ways, I'm going to be passive, but in some ways, I'm so impatient to get something done, and I don't know if that's for me to feel like I'm getting something done and feel like I'm productive or whatever. But I'll struggle.
So
I'll struggle with the other way of it as well.
Yeah, because just a few minutes ago, as we were discussing this, you were talking about don't poke the bear. So you understand that, and you see the split in your own personality, where we all have both sides of us, depending on whether I want to handle it that day or not.
If it's going to cause me trouble or something I don't like, then I'm not poking it.
But if I get rid of your junk,
if it's something I want, or if you want me to get rid of your junk for you, I'll do it. And that's where it comes down to is what I want or what I don't want.
And I will say, for my wife, one of the most frustrating things that I do is I will get a project 3/4 of the way done, and then it works.
I still have some trim in my kitchen that is not nailed down.
that finished trim.
It just drives me
insane.
insane.
Last piece of flooring going down that has to be cut at a weird angle, and so and I will put it off until I'm like, wow, it's been like 5 years since I've worked on that.
No, until you have to do something again, and you go,
something else
was
breaks
this never put back in place? Oh.
Hey, who took up that molding? You did about 10 years ago, Biggin. All right, so in Genesis 3:8, it says, "And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. So they knew something was up. They're not confused that we need to hide from God now. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." God said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man said, "Oh, well, let's stop there." So
Yeah, let's
we
stop
already
there.
have the seeds of false religion.
Yeah.
Man didn't do what God had told him to do, and so man then comes up with a solution on his own by hiding himself, and instead of being obedient to God, he comes up with his own way. And so we see the beginnings of false religion right here. Adam and his wife will cover themselves with leaves, which is not the acceptable mode. It's just man trying to do something to grope in the dark to restore a relationship with God. That is, by definition, false religion.
Right.
As opposed to allowing God to define how he wants us to come to him. So God asked him, "What's up?" Now, then Adam says, "The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit of the tree and ate." Well, first of all, this sounds like a 3-year-old, because this is exactly how when I walk into the room and there's pasta sauce all over the floor, and I go, "What is going on?" And when my kid goes, "Well, so-and-so said we were going to make
Your kid so-and-so
Yes.
said we were...
So it's passing the blame. And here we've got to be really careful. And I usually will ask people, who is Adam blaming? And they'll almost always say, Eve. Read it carefully. Who's he blaming?
He blames God.
He's blaming God. This woman you gave me. If you hadn't given me such a broke woman. And so.
Also, bad argument. Also, every time.
Every time.
10 out of 10. That
Every
also
time.
a bad argument. That one doesn't work either. Don't blame God. Don't blame the woman. Neither.
I'm going to say anytime we blame others for our mistakes, we try to use victimhood to say, these things happened to me and that's why. We tell our kids if they apologize and it's followed by a conjunction, then it's not a real apology. See, I'm sorry, but... So here Adam is passing the buck back to God. It's your fault. If you hadn't given me this woman, then there wouldn't be a problem. Which is, sometimes we're going to get to the story of Esau and Jacob, but I had this Sunday, someone asked me, why could Esau not repent? Even though he sought it with tears. He really wanted to. And so I actually pointed back to this text and said and pointed out that Esau wasn't repenting and trying to restore his relationship with God. He wanted his money back.
He wanted his stuff.
He wanted the consequences to be taken away. And so often,
And how
I was
often
about
do
to
we
say,
see
oh,
that?
goodness, that hits
Wow,
home.
yeah.
That's
so I'm going to go to jail because I've been stealing from my taxes. God, please forgive me. Are we really asking God to forgive us, or are we saying, take the consequences away? I
Usually
don't want a
that one.
spanking.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And how often are my motives not pure in that moment?
Well, I think in the fallen world, our motives are never completely
Right.
pure.
I would agree.
But-
But you start to look at your own heart in that time and you go, wow, okay.
Which I think one of the signs of true repentance is recognizing the ugliness of our sin so that we say, I deserve punishment. And
Yeah.
so the punishment that will be meted out, I deserve. So God, whether or not the punishment happens is immaterial. I need your forgiveness. And we see that in David's heart in Psalm 51. Against you and you only have I sinned and done this great wickedness in your sight, so that the bones that you've broken may rejoice. He's not asking God to take away the punishment. He's saying that I can rejoice in the punishment, recognizing that I deserve this. And so here, Adam is not at that place. He is still passing the buck. And God, just like when he said, Adam, where are you? He didn't really need to know. He knew where Adam was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who told you were naked? He knew he had already eaten. So, but God is walking them to self-realization, and he often does that with us.
His mercy, his patience as he walks them through that. And I've seen that in my own life at times, things that I have battled against in my walk with Christ, or what I'm doing and how he continuously is asking me questions and leading me towards him. And how often my rebellious heart wants to say, it's not my fault, you
That's
know?
right.
Yeah.
It's this woman. It's this man you gave me.
It's this man you gave me, God. Or these children.
So God plays along. It's this woman, so he turns to the woman. And God does, and says, what is this that you have done? And the woman passes the buck. So the man says, it's this woman's fault. God says, well, and the woman that says, it's the snake's fault. And so God doesn't ask the snake because snakes aren't supposed to talk. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you've done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
It's biblical that we should hate snakes. I'm just saying.
Yes, because we're all from the seed of Eve.
Yes,
so
yes.
And
I just don't like them.
Recognize that in this curse we have that mix between the serpent, who's somehow culpable, and honestly, preacher hat off. I don't understand how this creature
I don't understand
is
how. Yeah, as you were reading that, my first thought goes back to again. How did we physically hold the serpent itself responsible? But somehow,
yes,
he does.
So,
but we know that he's talking to
both Satan and the
serpent, right?
And that there's a lot of times as I'm reading the Bible, the question will pop in my head: is this spiritual or physical?
Well, and maybe this is just something, I don't know, I'm arguing out loud as I'm going through my head, but maybe this is something where it's just a reminder to us of this story. Just like the rainbow, it reminds us of that story. This is just another physical representation for us.
Whenever you see a snake and inside of you, everything goes,
Biblical.
Yes.
It's biblical.
Do
not mess with them.
I don't like snakes, and I will one of my interactions with snakes. I haven't shot up the house for a snake like somebody we know, and I won't say his name. But
I would do it in a heartbeat.
He didn't actually shoot. He just wanted to.
I was working a job that was the customer that I was dealing with was international, so I was working all night and sleeping during the day. And Ann was home with the kids, and Emily, Molly, and William were all little bitty. And so I woke up to the sound of squealing girls, and then Ann starts yelling, Tom. And so I come down the stairs. I'm like, what is going on? She's like, there's a snake in the cabinet. And I'm like, no, there's not. And I'm thinking that it's a toy snake. It's like, and it wasn't like early spring when snakes will sometimes come in. I'm like, there's not a snake in the cabinet. The snake's not going to get in the cabinet. And so Ann had taken.
And you're coming out of a sound sleep, too. You're not logically thinking this through. You're just thinking, there's not a snake in the house. Leave me alone.
And so she's like, it is the kid. The kid saw it. I saw it. It's there. And so she had a cabinet that was one of the lower cabinets by the dishwasher that she made the kids' sippy cups and the little bowls and the little plates. It's in there. So, and they're like all standing on couches as if that's going to affect anything. But they're giving me directions.
Snakes don't like furniture.
That's right. I open the door, and I'm still half asleep. And sure enough, there's like a pine snake or a green snake that's coiled up amongst the sippy cups.
Oh, my goodness.
So I take the sippy cup and kind of hold his head and reach in there and grab this thing. And I'm, I went back in the living room. I'm like, here it is. And then the snake starts wrapping around my arm and trying to turn his head to bite me. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm trying to be the big man. The snakes can get you. But at this point, I'm a little uncomfortable. Because a snake is really just one big muscle.
And
Yeah.
so far, that's an understatement of the broadcast today.
And so
Uncomfortable.
There would have been no playing. Would have been no playing
So
whatsoever.
I really want to get this snake out of my hand at
Ian's
this
in your
point.
camp.
And so I go to the kitchen to go open the door, and there's a deadbolt lock that the key had been turned, and the key's not in it. So I've got the snake in my hand, and I'm now beyond uncomfortable because this thing's coiling and uncoiling around my arm.
It's flipping and trying to do all this.
Trying to bite me, and I'm like, "Where's the key to the deadbolt?" And Nan's like, "It's in there." And I'm like, "Well, come unlock it because I've only got one hand." She's like, "I ain't getting off the couch."
So did you go back through the living room to the other
Yes.
door?
So I have to go through all these iterations and macerations to get outside. And by that point, I'm scared to throw the snake because the snake is so agitated that he's doing
gonna latch
everything.
on, yeah.
And so I literally have a tiger by the tail
What do I do with it?
because if it's all coiled around my arm, if I release it, all it's going to do is come back and bite me. Long and short, I don't like snakes. And I ended up, I think, bashing this, like stunning the snake against like the brick on the side of the house and then chucking it. And then coming back later and it was gone, so I didn't feel as guilty. Because I had a grandmother that would give me a whooping if you killed a snake that's a good snake.
Oh, and see, that's the issue, though. For most people, do we ever find a good snake? And I do realize that they eat the bad snakes and they eat the bugs and they, eat
Eat rats.
Yeah, they do the things that we want them to do. But I'll never forget walking out of the house one day and I had one and I killed it. It was on the steps. And I jumped over it and got a shovel, chopped its head off, and I just left it laying there because, that's all I was going to do. I
That's
killed
right.
it.
My job's done.
My job is done. That's all, husband material right there. Ben came home from work like freaked out because he come walking up and there's this big snake laid out,
No, I can't.
Snakes
I
are
cannot.
not.
I cannot.
Not
a friend.
Not a friend.
Why would people handle them, especially in a church? Like, why can't we look at other stuff that?
Yeah, I've got a whole Bible. I'm not going to park on Mark 16.
Yeah, like, I'm not like Gideon used some sheep wool to see if God was for real or not. Let's try that. That seems innocent. A sheep had to die. I hate that.
I'm so sorry.
But it's
But
not
I'm not handling snakes.
the sheepskin's not going to bite anybody. Like Gideon was all about that. So let's do that. I'll test that one out. I'm not handling more snakes. I'm not doing that.
Somebody listening to us
I handle
today
snakes, y'all.
We're not doing it. We're not doing it.
Okay, so the snake is told that between the woman and the snake, he would put enmity, and between her offspring, and that is literally in the Hebrew seed, between her seed and your seed, he shall bruise your head and he shall bruise your heel. This is the first prophecy of somebody's got to come. And the breach between God and man has just happened, and God is saying, from this woman, that God's going to do the miracle that he's going to do through humanity, someone is coming.
Yeah.
The drumbeat will continue. And we're going to see over and over and over and over again as we look at these Bible stories that everything is screaming, something's got to come fix this. As we watch the kings of Israel, at their very best, they're pretty lame. And then they get worse and worse and worse. Nobody is good enough to own the throne of God's people.
Right.
Somebody's got to come.
Yeah, our students, we're teaching through Solomon right now, and not through Solomon, we're teaching through Proverbs and talking a lot about Solomon during all this. And I'm constantly having a reminder, like, look, Solomon's preaching this. Solomon's telling this to his son about being wise and all these things, and he didn't hold up his end of this at all. Like, he doesn't hold up his end of this at all. He doesn't follow any of this.
Mankind, but the heart. You see that in Solomon's story. Still,
so many
how
times
it pulls him.
I'd looked at, hey, if only Solomon had really held tight to this one, and if he had actually, it's almost,
and then
it's
his
just
son,
so ironic. Like last week we were in Proverbs 16 where it says wisdom and knowledge is better than all the gold and all the silver. And I was like, man, Solomon,
If you had just added and the ladies.
like this is. Well, he talks about lady wisdom, and it's like, that's not the one you were chasing, my guy. Like,
and then you look at it, and you look at what happens with his son, and then you have Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and then the nation splits.
Yep.
And then we run into what you're talking about. We prove over and over again that no one is qualified to fill the throne.
Exactly.
And so this is the beginning of human history, and in the beginning, we just like we said last week, we see that Satan's temptations are exactly the same. As we see the curse, to some degree, the curse is almost God just saying, in a fallen world, this is the way it is. This is the way that we act, that humans act. And so I want to read the curse to Eve and to Adam at the same time, because I want us to look at some of the contrast between them. So to the woman, he says, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. I got nothing to say there except I'm so thankful that women are the ones that go through this and not men, because I really think when you go back to our disposition as a man and not wanting to poke the bear, that the human species would have ended a long time ago if we had to go through childbirth.
We're just not fooling with it. Sorry about that.
That was painful. I'm out.
I had a kidney stone once, and I
knew that was coming.
I had a kidney stone one time, and I'm not doing that. And so I'm very thankful that, you know, my fiance and all the moms out there, thank you so much for what you've done.
Ann did it 5 times.
Gosh.
Knowing what it was going to be like. So, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now the first thing is Eve's is really short.
Yeah.
And Adam's is very descriptive. To Adam, he tells Adam what he's going to do, and to Eve, he tells her how she's going to feel. To Adam, it has a lot about his vocation, and to Eve, it's about her relationships. Now, I'm not trying to push a stereotype, because obviously there are always differences in each individual human, because we're all, every human is a mix between a man and a woman.
Yes.
I'm just pointing this out. Yes. But
we're not confusing genders with that. That's a different.
Generally speaking, my experience is that this plays out almost stereotypically. That, in fact, I learned a lesson. I for a while had a period where I was doing a lot of counseling with soldiers, Marines, and airmen who had been in conflict and combat and were dealing with PTSD. And so they would get a letter from the VA that they had to have a counselor that they met with them, and they didn't have a choice if they were going to keep up with their stuff. They would have to come see somebody. And I would sit down with them, and they would stare across, sitting in my office, and it was just really unproductive. They had to be there in their mind. Whether that's true or not is immaterial, because they really didn't have to be. But they felt like that they were being forced to do this. They had chosen a preacher from the list because they figured it would be easier and lamer, just like we all do, you know, when we're in college and you look at the rate my professor, this guy is super easy, so that's the one I'm taking. And so I could not get them to open up, could not get them to talk. And so I started doing something where I would say, hey, I've got some things to do. Would you mind walking with me while I go do them? And with men, sitting there like you're in the principal's office across from somebody, I would get nothing. But once we were walking through the park and moving some stuff around, all of a sudden they're opening up. They're starting to talk. We men are, if they're acting and they're moving, we will start talking with each other. We're doing something. That's why men, if you ever go to a party, are all hanging out by the grill, because we're acting, feeling like we're doing something. Whereas women, okay, let me back this up. So one of the problems that I've always had as a husband is my wife will look at me and say, this is going on, and she'll tell me some problem. By the time she's halfway into describing the issue, I'm
figured out how to
I'm
solve
fixing
it already.
Right?
Yes.
I know how to fix this.
Yes.
This is easy.
You're trying to repair it.
And so she'll finish telling me, and I'm like, all right, so what you need to do, and I'll do it usually because I'm an idiot in the most mansplaining, obnoxious way. Here's what you need to do to fix this. Or I will go in my ignorance and fix it. The story that I've told from the pulpit, which actually really happened, I'd been married for probably 6 months, and Ann had a job. I I'll leave some of the details out because all of the players are still alive. Ann had a job, and she ended up making a mistake at the job and making a huge mess. And she was working in food service and made this huge mess. And her boss cusses her out in front of her fellow employees and just dog cussed her, humiliated her, made her feel worthless. So she came home. She's upset, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And she tells me what happened, and so in my mind, I'm going to fix this. So what I did was I went to the office that this guy worked, and I walked in the door. And as I walked in the door, the guy had never met me before. He looks up from his desk and says, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the guy that's about to teach you a lesson." I actually used more colorful language than that, but I turned as I said it and locked the door from the inside, which I could see on his face gave him this look of horror. So I took my belt off and wore him out like he was a little kid, chased him around the room. And he was a big guy. Chased him around the room with that belt and wore him out and said, "If you ever think of my wife's name again, I'm going to haunt your dreams." And then stormed out, thinking, I'm the white knight. I fixed this problem. Right? So I'm going to go. In my mind, I really thought I would go home, tell Ann what I had done, and that she was going to run up and hug me and smooch me and thank you so much.
You are so manly.
That's right. The testosterone just dripping off of me as I walk in the door. Let me tell you what I did. I took care of this problem. And, of course, she's horrified that I've just humiliated her in front of all these people that she had worked around. And I quit for her, obviously. And so now we don't have this source of income, and we're both trying to take classes and go to school.
And it's going to go all over campus.
Yes. And this was an on-campus job, and so now everybody's going to know about
the
it.
details. So everybody's going to know about it. Yes.
Yeah, that was not how that was supposed to be handled. So now when my aunt starts telling me a problem, I'll say, whoa, stop. Is this a problem that you need me to solve? Because sometimes she'll tell me a problem, and it is. She's like, hey, the sink is leaking, and it's going everywhere every time I use the garbage disposal. That's not just her venting. You know,
Yes.
she wants me to get up and go fix it. Sometimes, though, if she's telling me about this friend of hers that has said these things or is acting in this way, I'm not supposed to fix. I'm just supposed to, and I'm air quoting here, be there for her.
Yes. You are supposed to be there for her.
And I will
you
say,
listen as she's working it out, because a lot of times our talking to you about something is I'm resolving it in my head. Am I going to A, do something about it, or am I going to B, is this a let it go? Is this one of those where I realize it's not important enough for there to be a confrontation or conflict with it? But boy, I just want somebody to look at me and go, that's unfair.
yes. And see, men, no offense, and I know there are exceptions. Once we hear that I don't need you to do anything, we don't really hear a whole lot after that.
Check out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt's over here with a look on his face. Yeah. I mean, you do tend to check out, but we need somebody to listen. And what you're
And go,
doing,
girlfriend, that ain't right.
That ain't right. Or, just say, I believe you. Just say that it's not fair to you. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I don't want somebody to always fix the problem.
Let's go eat some ice cream together and watch The Notebook. I don't know what to do here. I got nothing.
Watch The Notebook. Titanic. Let's just throw them all out.
You want to go eat? That's usually it's like you need to go get some chips and salsa.
So men naturally in their hearts, what they want to do is mess this up by fixing it, and women, generally speaking, want to discuss it.
So Adam and Eve, somebody's doing something and the other person is relational. They just want to talk it through. I want you to know me. I want you to see me, and I want you to love me as I am.
And if you look at, we read on the women's curse, your desire shall be for your husband, he shall rule over you. If I've even heard it preached where it's like the wife is going to love her husband. No, that word desire, the next time that Hebrew word is used is that sin has its desire for you and it's crouching at the door.
Yes.
And so the natural tendency after the fall is the wife fighting for control, and the natural tendency is for the husband to fight for control. And let me just really blow your mind. You still see that in the church.
Oh, yeah, definitely you see it in church. But I was thinking as you were reading that and we're talking about it, I'll never forget when I got, obviously anybody listens to this or knows me knows that I like to talk. But I have girlfriends who don't talk as much, or people that I have worked with over the years. And it was in my 20s that I was working for a woman who was she was my boss, and she was kind of quiet. And so we're talking it through, and I was, kind of just talking about a Bible story I remember it was a Bible lesson I'd been in, and I was like, I realize how bad I am because I'm always talking about things, and I realize that I'm trying to manipulate the situation to control it in some way. And I said, I wish I could be more like you. You're so quiet and submissive. And she went, what? And then as we're talking it through and over the next few years as I knew her and came to, we really loved each other and she was great. But I realized that being a talker or being a little bit more quiet, both are women who are under the curse, still trying to do the same thing. We are both trying to get to the same goals, maybe using different methods of doing it.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to pick on any preachers, but I've heard wives obey your husbands being preached as shut up woman and get me a sandwich. And that's that preacher trying to control somebody, because you can't read Ephesians 5 and read the next set of verses where it says, and husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, and not see that your role, husband, is to be sacrificially loving your wife.
So maybe he needs to fix the sandwich.
So maybe you get up and fix sandwiches for both of them.
Honestly, I would probably just I'd like my sandwich my own way. So I'll just fix
So you're just
you're just a control. It's like,
I'm just gonna.
Okay, what did you do with the mayonnaise here?
Exactly. This is too much. This is not enough. I wanted light ice. This is all of that. I'll just, I'll just do it myself. It's fine.
That's fine. Just leave me alone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so reality, that the curse is saying that in both the husband and wife's case, sin is now made it to where you're going to fight for control in your marriage. Mm-hmm. That's the way that plays out is going to look different.
But on the good days, it's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say that, okay, so what we see from the curse, this is just observation. As Piper said, we're just observing the text now. We're not. What I see from the text is that a woman's greatest need is intimacy. And by intimacy, I don't mean sex. I mean...
You know me.
Right. That you know me, that you know what my needs are. You don't have to ask me where I want to eat because you know me so well that you know where I want to eat.
What's my favorite color?
Yeah, exactly.
He knows he's going to have that. He's,
So her greatest desire is intimacy. Now, it's a little bit harder to suss out of what Adam's being told, but since it's all talking about vocation, I will point this out. God's allowed me to have the privilege to visit lots of places on this earth. And I've always thought it was funny that a universal, almost across all cultures, that when two men meet, within 30 seconds of them meeting, one of them will say, so what do you do? Everywhere on earth, and whether that's Turkey, Nepal, Cuba, Dominican Republic,
what do you spend your time on?
It's why do men ask that question? Because they want to know where they fit in the ranking in the hierarchy. So what do you do? So I would say that just like we see in the curses to the woman, that your desire shall be for your husband, he shall rule over you. Her greatest need is intimacy. From the man, I see that his greatest need is respect. And I've seen that play out. I will say that men crave that. And by respect, I don't mean that he's looking for his wife to kowtow to him but
some guys are like that in jerks.
Absolutely.
That guy who stood up and preached about a sandwich, probably right. That guy.
And we throughout human history we found ways to justify what's really just being a jerk.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, people would do the spiritual gift inventories every 6 months, and I've heard people say, "Well, you know what? My spiritual gift is prophecy, so I'm just a jerk. You got to deal with it." Or, you know what?
I tell it like it is.
I just tell
it like it is.
I'm a Scorpio. Yeah. I'm just going to be. You know what? No, Karen, you're just a jerk.
No.
I'm a Scorpio.
Libra. Yes.
I don't even know what a Scorpio. If you're a Scorpio, I'm not trying to offend you.
I was about to say, he just thought of the first one that he thought of. It may be, it may not be.
Who knows? We're not real sure.
I'm a Sagittarius, so you're just going to have to get past it. No,
Yeah.
no, it's just you're just being a jerk.
I just see things black and white, and it's not, and that's not a race joke. But I see things. I just say them how they are, like you said. Like it's just at this point you're just giving us a heads up that you're a
Is it okay if I
turd.
give the open response back then of like, no, that has nothing to do with your star alignment. That's just because you're a jerk.
You're just a jerk.
Yeah.
Right, and being somebody that nobody wants to be around is not a spiritual gift, dude. So
It's not listed, is it? Is it
Yeah.
through the Spirit?
So we see control and self-idolatry is weaving its way through both people's heart, and
It's already there, right?
we see how that plays out.
Well, and we see like a lot of men whenever you hit that. I mean, the whole idea behind the whole midlife crisis is I have come to a point where I feel like I don't matter anymore. Like what I do doesn't matter anymore. I don't see it all. It all comes down, and like even in again me like Matt's personality, it's probably not in super arrogance, I guess. I don't know if I feel I try my hardest not to come across as arrogant, but like for me, it's I want to do stuff that matters. I want to be a person that matters. Like that's just that I don't know where that comes from other than just we just
all
talked
of
about
us
that. It's
live
just
for purpose. We all want a purpose in our life, and God gives us that. It's our submission to Him and our walk with Him that leads that purpose into either a place of humility or a place of pride.
But see, this is where I wish that would be the purpose that I could say I struggled with. Though it's who do I matter to and who am I important to and stuff like that. So I would love to
but
claim
we can
that I'm
tie that.
Yes,
that all ties together.
I would love to say that I'm striving for that purpose, but in my sin, I'm usually not. Again, it's much more like who am I impressing? Who's watching? Who's this? Whatever. And like when God convicts me of that, it's like you moron. You're so dumb, and then I get realigned with that of searching for what God has laid before me, what God has set before me.
And
that's
His
not even
purpose for me does not have to be the ranking that we were just talking
and
about.
And that's not a minister standpoint. That's not a church staff standpoint. That's as a disciple, as a believer,
Absolutely.
as a follower of Christ. Like that's not just for the three of us here who could say we're blessed enough to work in church service and church ministry. That's not that's for every believer ever that God has given you a purpose, that God has called you to something. Whether it's you're going to be the most God-fearing, gospel-sharing electrician that there ever is, or you're going to be the most, godly mother that stays at home and raises a bunch of godly kids. Whatever, and wherever you fall on that spectrum, God has a purpose for you, and that's what you need to chase after. But for me, like sometimes I want to chase how I matter in every other circle outside of how am I chasing after God and chasing after what God has set before me.
Because the ranking system of the world versus the ranking before God is two different things.
Yeah.
Well, and the enemy loves to take beautiful things that God has created and warp them. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus called all of his disciples to go do great things, go into all the world and preach the gospel. And where the enemy twisted it was not to just want to be great for God, but to be the greatest. Jesus caught them multiple times.
Yeah.
Mark 9, they're arguing on the way, and they're like,
Yes.
who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom?
And so the difference is God called me to be great for him. When I cheapen that to, well, I'm better than this guy.
Right.
I'm better than him, then it becomes wicked and evil. And this relationship, the wife and the mother being on the emotional side a natural nurturer is a beautiful thing. The husband being somebody that pushes their family to better things, to let's improve ourselves. Let me get out here. Let me be that guy that works 16 hours a week so that you respect me and respect the fact that I'm providing for this family. And we work together, and this is a beautiful thing that can lead to, people who in this church have celebrated 60 years of marriage. The enemy can warp that into, I've had couples that sat down in my office that literally, as the husband's describing how much he dislikes his wife, she's glaring straight ahead, and you can feel the venom coming off of her. And this was a couple that probably 10 years before, she was having her big day, and she wore this huge expensive outfit, and she had written down in a notebook over and over again, Mrs. Jerry Johnson, or what. How does the enemy take us from that love and to that hatred in such a short window? And it's through selfishness. And I will tell you, I'm not saying I do it. What the antithesis of the curse is this. And I can tell you unequivocally, if you want happiness in your marriage, let me tell you how to find it. Spend your marriage trying to make your spouse happy. If I do everything in my power and I fight not for my happiness and not for my way, but to make sure that my wife is happy and that everything that happens to her is what's best for her, if I work to do that, and she's even trying a little bit, you'll have the perfect marriage. And so often we read the curse or we hear Ephesians 5 being preached, and instead of thinking, I need to change my heart, I'm thinking, I hope she's hearing this. This is what she needs to do.
Mm. Or my friend needs to do this,
Oh,
or I see this to
absolutely.
fix somebody else, instead of looking at how it should affect my heart and my consciousness as I walk around.
And so what we see in the curse is that the enemy has wormed into their hearts and their affections to where the wife is longing for someone to know her, that mental and spiritual oneness. That's what she's longing for, and yet so often we see as a result of the fall, her doing everything in her power almost to undermine that. And the husband longing for his wife to respect him and to admire him. And it's almost like because of the fall, he does everything in his power to make sure that can never happen.
To make himself look like an idiot, and that is a quote out of my book. I'm not talking about anybody else. That is
Yes.
that is a firsthand quote.
Yes.
Of me, like, no offense, kind of like what you did.
But
In order to make sure I look really awesome, really cool, I look a complete just jerk.
But owning it is such an important part. Both of those roles, and being able to communicate that well to each other, even if it's brief, if you're not a talker, but owning it, being able to have the ability to either say, I'm sorry, or here's what I was trying to accomplish and I didn't do well. That's so important.
90% of all marriage counseling is just convincing people that nobody can read your mind.
Oh, my. But I want him to be able to read my mind. He needs to know what restaurant I want today, because just the other day we went to one of our other favorites, and I've had it, and I want to go to the other one. So we're leaving church on Sunday. I'm under conviction. I already don't feel good about it, and he doesn't know where I want to go. How does he not know?
I hear you.
But that's, and
Yeah,
you realize he doesn't. And it's unreasonable expectation. He does not know when I want him to load the dishwasher.
Yeah, PSA, he's clueless.
He's clueless.
I'm
He does not
clueless.
know.
All of us are clueless.
Yeah.
Just
He does not
shooting in the dark
understand.
here.
No, and when the kids come along, and he does not know that I want him to take this diaper because I've been with them all day long.
Right.
He doesn't see it that way. He's just come in from work.
And you can almost in a Pavlovian sense get trained. Okay, so here's one of the big mistakes I made in marriage is I learned when the kids were little bitty, okay, if she's in a foul mood and things are bad, I take the kids and go. Give her some time. And at some point, she's, I'm sure I presented it in a loving place, like, well, clearly you're in a bad mood, so I'll take the kids and get out of here. And she looked at me, she said, I don't want my family to leave. I want to be with y'all. And so I'm like, well, crap, I want there to be a flow chart of if then, right? If fussy.
I need a Venn diagram, please,
Yes.
of just, I got this circle and this circle, and this is when we're intertwining both the
And
circles,
I'm
and
like-
then there's the sweet
I'm
spot
like-
right in the middle.
Baby, I love you, but, and I'm looking, if she says this, then are the kids fussy? Yes, no. I'm working through this. Give me a second. All right, so I'm taking the kids to Hardee's.
Are the dishes done?
Is it my fault? And it just has a for always. Was
Yes.
it my fault? Always.
Not. We know when it's our fault, and we know when it's your fault, and we know. But but you do. You actually have to just say, okay, is this a take the kids and run kind of moment, or is this a you need to go for a ride in the car, or is this a I just need to.
I'm giving you the checkbook and you disappear.
I know. Or is this I need to run to Sonic for supper, so we all sit down together and have a picnic outside somewhere?
Yes.
It kind of. I just
And
need
so
a break.
that takes communication.
Yeah, it does.
And I will usually, and it's somewhat fictitious, but it's a conglomeration of multiple things. Will tell couples, or even when I'm teaching marriage stuff, a story that did happen. We had Molly. So Molly's birthday is the 1st of October. So this is Thanksgiving. So we have a 2-month-old. We had decided together, she just bit off more than she could chew, that my family was going to come to the house for Thanksgiving. The original thinking is I don't want to get up, load these kids, go from house to house to house, so everybody can come to me. And so we thought we'd work through this.
It's going to be perfect.
It's going to be perfect. So it's Thanksgiving morning.
She's been up since 4 a.m.
Yeah,
putting
she's
the
been
ham
up
in.
basting a turkey. I'm sitting in the living room. We had just watched the Macy Day Parade.
Oh, wow.
Which your kids absolutely love, by the way.
Oh, yes.
I need to put that out there.
I love the parade, but I haven't got to watch it since I
have
had
never
kids,
met
okay?
a 16-year-old girl who was so distraught than when Lizzie came to me, was talking to me one Wednesday of when they canceled the Macy's Day Parade
Oh,
this year.
yes.
She was broken.
The
She
Macy
was
Day
so
Parade
upset.
and the dog show that follows, my family sits there and watches like it's not okay. So we'd watch that.
I remember being angry as a young mom because I'm in the kitchen Thanksgiving morning and I am like running crazy trying to get everybody's clothes ironed and washed and ready to go, trying to get the food that I've got to take to the 3 different places we had to go, and I can't watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
She just put a TV in the kitchen.
Oh,
Well, but at
What
that time it
a
was like 300
solution.
pounds. And have to. Okay, so
Thanks.
Anne's in the kitchen and she's doing whatever she's doing. I'm in with the kids, and then the way Thanksgiving stuff kind of segues, it goes Macy's Day Parade, the dog show, and then you go right into used to be Detroit versus Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And now I think they've divided it where the Cowboys play
I keep
somebody.
up with none
and-
of the sports events.
So
yeah.
I'm watching the football game. The family's going to get here, in an hour and a half. The littles are. Emily's the only one she doesn't want to watch football, so she's wandered in the kitchen with her mom, and I'm sitting there watching football. Anne is increasingly getting angry, and in her mind, she's
Pots
thinking,
and pans are getting louder.
this fool knows that his parents and sister and brother-in-law are coming to our house. She's got a child on a leg that she's dragging around, and she's slamming pots together. I'm sitting in the living room going, and I don't care about either team. I hate the Cowboys, and I didn't even know that Detroit had a football team until I had to look it up on the internet. And so, but I'm watching this game going, whoever the people with the stars on their heads are, those people need to get their in play together. I'm not. Hey, keep it down in there, or turning the volume up just instinctively. Turning the volume
She's
up.
so loud in the kitchen where she's
Goodness, what is she in there
working.
doing? So finally, it builds from she's annoyed to she's angry to the volcano erupts, and I have
She's dumping the mashed potatoes on your head.
yes, I have a child with a poopy diaper thrown into my lap, and I'm yelled at, and it comes down to, if you'd loved me, you would know.
How did you not know, though, Tom?
But when I'm telling this story, it's always funny because I use this example over and over in marriage counseling. The wife is sitting there angry for Anne's behalf, and your cheeks are a little flush right now, Donna. I mean, you're angry, and
I'm on her behalf, and this is 20 years later. And
the
I'm
guys
still-
are sitting there going, yeah, I mean, just say something.
Just say
Just
something.
stick your head in the door.
I'm not unreasonable. I'll do whatever you
If
tell me,
stuck
but
your
just
head in
tell
and say,
me.
hey, can you come in and snap these beans? I'm on it.
100%.
And so
But
that
by the time I've reached the point where I'm going to say that, the way that I say, come and put the carrots on the cook or whatever it is that I'm
or
doing,
can you take this child that you made?
then it turns into a fight because I say it ugly.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you're on the defensive, and we end up going,
Yes.
yeah.
So
So-
how'd that Thanksgiving go?
Oh yeah. That's one of those where the family leaves is like something was not.
Tom and Ann must be having problems.
that baby must really be keeping her up.
I think there's some postpartum depression going on. No, it's just a husband who's a jerk. Is what the problem is.
Yeah.
All right. So the fall still affects us today. So we are going to go from this to Noah and see how badly the fall affects the humanity just a few thousand years later. So
Consequences continue.
consequences continue. And the drumbeat of we desperately need someone we need a superhero. We need somebody to step into human history and fix it. So this has been Not Another Church Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Tom.
I'm Donna. I'm our children's and women's minister here at North Glencoe.
And I'm Matt, and I'm the student pastor here. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Go serve your king.
This has been Not Another Church podcast with your host, Pastor Tom. Thanks for listening, and go serve your king.